Bonjour à tous. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be in Tunisia and listening to great founders and ecosystem builders in the region, and I'm quite happy to be here. My name is Andre. I'm a partner at Modus Africa. We are a VC fund focused in deep tech AI on the continent. And I'm quite pleased to have Dr. Bienvenue with us today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Andre.
Just quickly, before we jump into the subject, I think it's quite interesting to understand how important AI is and the size of it. Just last year, there's about $400 billion in terms of market size. In the next 5 years, it's going to hit $1.4 trillion. This is massive, a 20% growth year over year. But there's quite big implications, good and bad, that I think for Africa. Obviously, the opportunity is real. But if we miss this opportunity, it's quite drastic and leaving the continent behind. And as I was asking the question this morning to Cinda, the head of engineer at InstaDeep, how she perceived infrastructure as a challenge for the continent. And I think this is the perfect panel and the perfect guest to discuss those challenges. So please, I would love to have a brief introduction, Dr. Bienvenue, about who you are, and obviously your deep expertise in Africa would be quite interesting today.
Thank you very much, Andre, and I would like to thank you for inviting me for this, for this panel and for these discussions. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bienvenue Abukonto-Soglo. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Africa, but also our International Government Affairs CTO Liaison at Intel Corporation. So one part of my job is to advocate for harmonized policies across the African continent, including on AI, broadband, data protection and privacy. But the second part of my work is to engage with universities, research institutions, startups on the African continent to see project collaboration at the intersection of technology and policy. And it is in that capacity that I'm actually here this afternoon. Okay.
Excellent. So to get started, let's think about or talk about the current state of AI in Africa. Where do you see the current state and where we're going?
Thank you very much for the question. And first, I will like to provide a brief introduction to Intel. Certainly, you hear Intel. If you have a computer, you have our logo there, right? It's a company headquartered in Santa Clara in the Silicon Valley in the US. We have around 120,000 employees worldwide, of course, including Africa. And AI is one of the superpowers that is enabling the digitization of everything. And among the other superpowers, you have ubiquitous compute, pervasive connectivity, cloud-to-edge infrastructure, as well as sensing. One data point I would like to mention, and it's a memo published by Modus Africa VC, and it was published in June this year, that talk about the AI opportunity in Africa. So it's estimated at $1.5 trillion US, the GDP contribution to Africa by 2030. That's a, as you said earlier, massive opportunity, right? And as we look at Africa with a population of around, you can say 1.4, 1.5 billion people, and also with the mobile data traffic that will reach 2.5 exabytes when we look at the period between 2012 and 2028, we can see that Africa is going through accelerated digitization, and this is thanks to access to internet connectivity, but also the use of deep tech such as AI, in addition to availability of broadband as well as smart devices. However, in order to develop AI, there's a need to have access to processing capabilities, right? And those are provided by infrastructure such as data centers, infrastructure such as the cloud, among others. And broadband connectivity is also a very important aspect that enable AI. And when we look at the data or the broadband connection penetration on the African continent, according to the ITUD, is around 40%, right? Which is lower than the world average, but that represents an opportunity, right, for the continent. And in fact, there is a study published by the World Bank that estimates that for Africa to reach universal connectivity or broadband connectivity by 2030, there's a need to have an investment in the order of 100 billion US dollars between 2021 and 2030. And this investment, it is in the areas such as the infrastructure itself, the maintenance, and then skills development, as well as policy and regulation. So what I would say is that, you know, African government investing in infrastructure such as data centers, such as the cloud, such as high power compute, such as in telecommunications sector 5G, Wi-Fi 6, fiber, in addition to you know, skills development program, will help them unlock, right, the opportunity for AI in Africa.
And what's interesting with that too, Dr. Bienvenu, is AI could be applicable across sectors, from health tech, ed tech, fintech, and so forth. And even in parallel to that, the impact on the continent is massive, if we look at SDGs, for instance. But you're a doctor in the sense that you did create a report, you did create a research. I'm really curious to know what are the core findings from your report, and what does it mean for Africa?
Thank you very much, Andre. And in fact, I want to start with a perspective. Global companies like ours, we do have global you know, programs. And when we look at those programs, we found that, you know, we need to see how we can actually adapt those programs to the African continent. And therefore, as Intel, apart from the other, you know, engagement we have on the continent, and as we look at, you know, fostering ICT innovation on the African continent, we put together what we call at Intel a Digitalized Africa strategic program that has 4 key pillars. The first pillar is how to support the African startup ecosystem. The second pillar is community reach program, how to close the digital divide. The third pillar is about research and innovation, how you use deep tech to tackle African challenges. And the fourth pillar is about skills development for African decision makers and the youth. So focusing on the first pillar, and that is where we're looking at, okay, how do we support the African deep tech startup ecosystem? So we wanted to understand what is the land of play on the African continent, and that is the reason why last year we conducted 2 studies. The first study, it is on evaluating the African deep tech startup ecosystem, and the second study is on evaluating the African deep tech spin-off ecosystem from the lab to the market. So focusing on the first one, which we conducted in collaboration with AfriLabs and Brighter Bridges, what we found out was that the top 3 tech clusters are AI, machine learning, computer vision, data, cloud, and edge, and then we have hardware and robotics. Among those 3, AI, machine learning, and computer visions represent 60% of the tech clusters.
So that's an interesting gap for founders, entrepreneurs when looking at obviously the barriers, but also the opportunities, which leads me to my next question. We have Amazon, we have Google, we have NVIDIA, we have Microsoft. Intel is in Africa as well. What makes you quite an important player in this development of the ecosystem and bridging that gap, that $100 billion you mentioned, right? So what's your role in Africa in that sense?
Thank you very much, Andre, for this question. And then I'll start by saying globally, you know, when you talk about the digital infrastructure, right, you have, I would say, Intel technology almost everywhere. Right, and one thing I want to mention is that semiconductors are the underlying technology that's empowered the digitalization of everything. And this is being accelerated by the 5 superpowers that I talked about earlier, including AI. In Africa, what we're doing is that we're leveraging our technology, our global scale, to help solve African challenges. So I do have colleagues on the African continent that actually engaging as technology advisors with government, engaging with consumers, like, the computers that you have there that might have our logo, the desktop and so on. I have colleagues that are engaging with Ministry of Education in terms of the education, but also colleagues engaging with telecom operators, right? And so having said that, in addition to that, we also engage, and that's part of the first part of my work that I talked about earlier, engage with government to foster harmonized policies across the continent. For example, in areas such as spectrum, for example, for 5G, but also Pan-African AI policies. We work with Smart Africa to contribute to the development of the Pan-African AI blueprint, for example. Now, specifically coming to the deep tech startup ecosystem, based on the outcome of the report that we just talked about, we identified that there are 6 key focus areas that interventions are needed. And talking about, 3 key areas: digital skills development need, access to R&D resources, and university and research institution collaboration. We actually just concluded the first edition of the Intel Liftoff for African AI Startup Hackathon. And in fact, we did that one with Modis Africa VC, and it's concluded on the 29th of September. What that did, it helped us actually to bring in African AI startup into our Intel Liftoff program, which is a global program, virtual program, but it's provided focus on Africa. And so those startups that will be part of the program will kind of have opportunity to get access to knowledge, technical know-how, right, of Intel. And as I said, we are 120,000 employees worldwide. 85% of those employees are engineers. So we believe that there is, there is a great contribution we can bring from that perspective to the African startup or deep tech startup ecosystem in building the technical capabilities and engineering know-how. The second initiative we have, it is what we call the Train the Trainer for African deep tech hubs. So there, what we're doing is that we're engaging with the hubs in deep tech, such as AI, to share with them the different programs that we have. Intel Liftoff for Startup Program, Intel Developer Cloud, the Intel One API initiative, because we work to foster open ecosystem. We also share with them our AI tools at Intel. But at the same time, we also listen to the hubs. We want to hear from them what they are doing. We want to hear from them what are the programs, and then we engage in a conversation to see how we can work together. And we believe in that, two-way conversation, and I think that is the way that we can make meaningful impact as we contribute to the development of deep tech in Africa.
And just come back to the hackathon, which is your first hackathon in Africa, which we collaborated on. From an investor perspective, the quality of founder and technology that we saw throughout the hackathon was spectacular, almost outlier, I would say. But let me ask you this. Because you have experience with hackathon globally, it's a global program. I think it's worth sharing with the public. What was your perception of the quality of founders and tech know-how that came into the Africa program versus global program?
Well, I think great question, and I will just recall the comment from one of our tech leaders, because the tech leaders that actually supported these hackathons are engineers that support Intel globally. And so it is not that you carve a team and then focus only on Africa, so you get the global expertise. And the comment we got from those engineers is that, well, these teams that we got for the startups and AI are one of the top of what they've seen globally for the hackathon they have been running. And the second aspect, they say that these AI startups are tackling relevant use cases that are relevant to Africa and potentially relevant to developing countries.
And the way we saw it as an investor is as if it was Silicon Valley startups, but actually solving meaningful problems. So very exciting. If we shift gear, if we look at the continent, and you mentioned a few challenges happening, especially with the infrastructure, where do you see the most immediate opportunity in terms of countries or jurisdictions, and what do you look for if you want to develop the ecosystem?
Yeah, thank you very much. When We look at the African continent. Of course, we start with Tunisia, right? In Tunisia here, we have the great example of the Stadip, right? Yeah. You know, the great work they're doing. You know, in terms of policy, you have the Startup Act that actually, you know, came out, one of the first countries that enacted actually the Startup Act on the African continent. And then you have also other countries, you know, North Africa here, Morocco, Egypt, and in sub-Saharan Africa, like Kenya, Mauritius, South Africa, and Nigeria, just to cite a few. But those are countries where you see, you know, development of national AI strategies. For example, the latest one is from Rwanda, where they have specific areas where they want to use AI to improve, right, the life of people, to create, you know, job opportunities and to create wealth. So I think the movement is ongoing. Work still need to be done, but I believe there's a good momentum.
And you touched on that already being collaborative and working with others, but given your role as well is government affairs, and let's talk about, you know, data policies, privacies, and so forth. How are you involved with governments in educating them or getting on board into the deep tech ecosystem? Really top level.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. And I think this aspect is a very important aspect to foster the development of AI on the continent. And so in terms of policy engagement, I engage at the continental level with the African Union, but also, and then African Telecommunication Union, Smart Africa, and the sub-regions. There have been a lot of work that have been, you know, part of as our engagement with Smart Africa. For example, I understand that currently Smart Africa is gearing towards the finish line in terms of the development of a continental data governance blueprint, which I think will immensely contribute to help or to support countries in developing the national data governance policy. But as part of that, you have, as you mentioned, the need for having data protection and privacy, right, on the continent. So that effort, I work with key countries, I'll put it that way, but most importantly with Smart Africa, because it is important to see how the policy or regulations that are put in place could be harmonized or potentially harmonized across the continent. Because if you want to foster a single digital market, which is presenting Africa as one market, then you will expect that you have more or less one regulation. Of course, we do have, you know, 50 plus countries on the continent, which make it very challenging, but it's feasible, and that's the work that we're doing together with Smart Africa on developing those different policies.
And I'm not sure how much time we have, but I definitely want to keep some time for any questions. So let me ask you, let's go more centric towards the founders. You've been in the continent, you've been in the tech for quite some time. If you could share some advice to founders, entrepreneurs in deep tech in Africa, what can you share with them? I know you're not an entrepreneur, but I think it would be interesting to see it from you.
Yes, I mean, what I'm going to say, I think embarking on a very noble, I'll say, mission. And then why did I say that? Because in Africa, we have a lot of challenges, which means that those are opportunities, and having, you know, funders and entrepreneurs willing to tackle those challenges and take advantage of the opportunities, I think that is, that is something great. Of course, as we usually say, we all know that the road is not going to be easy, but once you really get there, you will see the massive contribution you're making to the continent. And I think that's really, and this I'm saying it not only as working with my current company, Intel, as African, but also as based on my experience on what I've seen elsewhere out of the continent. And so I think they play a very critical role on fostering socioeconomic development on the continent.
Yeah, and Cinda again mentioned something, a good analogy this morning when she said, without infrastructure, it's like a coder without a computer to a certain extent, and it's hard to prove your thesis and work on it. And I know from our side as investors and being part of the ecosystem, being able to see global players like Intel coming to Africa, having the hardware, and obviously doing that knowledge transfer of on the coding side, I think it's quite a catalyst for the founders. So I think for me, I'd like to tell my portfolio that you're not alone. But one final question before maybe we take a few more questions. If we go bottom up and we look at the ecosystem builder, the founders, and remove the government, for instance, how do you see the knowledge transfer between Intel, between the ecosystems and the deep tech, the deep tech ecosystem?
Yeah, thank you very much. As we look at the African deep tech ecosystem, there are different stakeholders, right? You did mention, whether it is private sector, the VCs, university research institutions, the hubs, and so on, right? And so, from our perspective, we want to see where we can make the most impact. And that is the reason why we actually conducted the study, to see where the key challenges are. And we actually did hear from the ecosystem itself, because as we were conducting the first study, we had workshops in Abuja in Nigeria, we had workshops in Kenya with the VCs, and also workshop with the entire ecosystem players, to hear from them as we conducting the studies. And in fact, I remember it was last year in July, the ecosystem were asking, okay, you're doing the studies, are you going to make them public? And then at that time, what I said is, okay, well, let's see. But then in the end, both reports are publicly available, and then you can access that. So the key aspect for us is to where we can intervene and make the most impact. And then as you said earlier, what we did in the hackathon is to bring our technical know-how to help, to upskill, yeah, right? The startup in that ecosystem, the hubs, and so on, plus working with Modest Africa and other stakeholders to bring in the value that they can add to that. So I think that's where we have a holistic, approach in fostering deep tech in Africa.
Well put. I think there's another slide. I'm not sure who's in charge, but on the other slide, there's links to the memos, both from Dr. Bienvenu and maybe not. Okay, anyways, I'll be happy to share that. But maybe lastly, if anyone has any questions for yourself, please. I'll give you this one, we'll share.
That's okay. Thank you. Merci André, merci Monsieur Dr. Bienvenu. Vos questions sont pertinentes. Thank you. I heard about Intel that develop many programs in Africa. The last and the oldest company with much programs in environment, the IE student the hackathon and many programmers. We talk about infrastructure for AI in Africa. We talk about access internet, we talk about developed skills, but when we talk about infrastructure, I want to hear you about the cost of computing resources. I want to hear you about that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your question. And I think those are questions we get when we talk about what are the challenges that people in Africa they face, because there's another study done by the GSMA, but also another data from the ITU, which says from the GSMA, if you look at Africa, you have around 81% of the people that are under at least 3G coverage. But then you find only 40%, if you are more optimistic, or less, that are using the internet. And therefore, there's a reason of usage gap, right? Of 40%, the coverage gap is about 18 to 19%. And some of the reasons that comes there, it's access to devices, the skills for people to use, and so on. Now, coming to the issue of cost of devices, I think I would like to provide you with a perspective in terms of how we enable the digital economy. So we create the technology, right? When you look at the laptop, is the processor that we put, whether it is in the computers, desktop, whether it is in the data center and AI, or telecommunication networks, autonomous vehicle, and so on. And so our customers are those who actually build those computers. So, we are not in a position to be able to say how much it's going to cost because we're just providing the component. Having said that, what we're seeing in some of the countries in Africa is that some governments are looking at different schemes, engaging with the suppliers of those devices. For example, you have program for teachers, for example, or you have the program for students, for example, right? And then they work, you have government, banks, and telecom operators, and so on, that have program over a couple of years to see how they can, spread over, the cost of those devices.
I could add maybe from an investor perspective, and I don't want to say that we foot the bill, because building technology is quite expensive. It's directly to your question, right? And what we're trying to do, and especially Africa, we're trying to find these partnerships, such as Intel, to be able to bring into our ecosystem, into our portfolios, but also for our portfolios to be in their ecosystem. And eventually, this allows a bit more economies of scale. I don't have a unit economics for you, but obviously we're trying to grant an access to these technologies for them to grow. And I think as the companies grow, hit their Series B plus and so forth, then it's a bit more standardized, right? But we see the big gap early stage because it's expensive, and that's when you build. Last question, maybe?
Thank you both for the insights. Dr. Bienvenu, you mentioned the second study regarding spin-offs. Could you expand on that, like the key findings you mentioned?
How much time do we have? So the second study is on evaluating the African deep tech spin-off ecosystem for the lab to the market. And the reason why we did the second study is that when we were doing the first study, we found that most of the startups that are doing deep tech or that are employing deep tech, they have no connection basically with the universities or research institutions. And therefore we did this second one with Simon Hong a hub and Wits University in South Africa. So for that study first, and then as we did for the first study, we have to define tech clusters, right? Because we talk about deep tech, so you have to define what is deep tech within that context. So in that report, we defined 10 tech clusters. And then it's, the report is publicly available, and then you can see it. So most of the tech clusters you have, among them AI, machine learning, data cloud, and edge. 7 that were in the initial report, and then we added 3. The 3 other tech clusters, you have biotechnology, you have nanotechnology, and then hydrogen and fuel cell. How did we come about those? Is based on the data that we got publicly available in terms of the spin-offs, and then, the sectors in which they are, and that's what helped us to refine the tech clusters. Now, the key findings, if we talk about, just to go about the key findings, we found that biotechnology is the tech cluster that is most used, 43% of the time. And then in terms of the sector, we found that health tech, right, the healthcare sector is the one that is actually, using most of the deep tech, around 33% of the time. Of course, we also have AI in the third place there. An important aspect there that we identified is that it's very difficult to find information publicly available in terms of the spin-offs, in terms of the research. And we think that is a huge gap. Why? Because if you don't know the research that are available to be able to assess the opportunity that is going to come out of that to potentially create a spin-off, that is not only a lost opportunity, but also you see that that's something that can actually contribute, right, on how we develop the deep tech startup ecosystem on the African continent. There's a bit more, but because of time, I hope that that's okay, and then we can take it offline once the panel is done.
Dr. Bienvenu, thank you so much for being here. And thanks everyone for listening to us and the questions.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Dr. Bienvenu. It was a great fireside chat.